The story of Rudra, cutting into the bubble reality created by Brahma, shows us that this nakshatra has a lot to do with our introduction into the sensorial world. Ardra is called the fresh one, the green one, because it is a newly introduced consciousness in the material world, fascinated by its various colors and scents and wishing to explore it. Rudra is the deity that, upon introducing himself into the fantasy world of Brahma, began dividing himself into an infinite number of conscious forms, which resulted in the destruction of Brahma's world. This destruction of the created world by Ardra is not always a literal one, but it is a destruction by way of the senses. Again, a fascination for the created world that is so strong and so overwhelming that one wishes to see and to taste everything available in it. One is overstimulated to such an extent that one's nervous system is so overwhelmed that it splits itself to entertain the various stimuli presented to it. This is, of course, reminiscent of the technological age and how even the consciousness of the modern human is split into fragments in order to watch a movie on a television screen on the wall, while scrolling on social media, while having a conversation with one's partner right next to one, while texting on one's smartphone, while eating a meal, while cleaning one's home. The mind of the modern man, in order to entertain the various stimuli and activities presented to him, must divide itself seemingly endlessly. Again, much like the consciousness of Rudra had to divide himself in order to partake in the various occurrences and activities of the material world simultaneously. Of course, another one of the qualities of Rudra is his apparent hatred of indulgence and vices, represented in the story of the offerings made to him as well as to Pushan and Bhaga, the deities of Revati and Purva Palguni, respectively. In this story, Pushan and Bhaga are seen as so shamelessly lustful that they don't bother to control themselves well enough to go about the correct procedures to begin consuming the offerings made to them. They don't even bother to wait for Rudra either, who is on his way. These two indulgent deities begin to gorge on the sacrifices of man, leaving little for Rudra. Of course, the story ends with Rudra's anger turned towards them, resulting in the plucking of the eye of the one and the smashing of the teeth of the other. Though many interpret these tales as representing Rudra's ascetic nature, explored more deeply, it actually reveals that Rudra himself is an indulgent deity. Rudra himself enjoys sensual activity, and he may even be more sensitive to pleasures than even Bhaga and Pushan, as we even saw in an earlier tale how he is so ravenous that he nearly destroyed Brahma's created world from the pleasure he derived from devouring it. So we are witnessing a seeming contradiction here. On the one hand, Rudra is himself highly indulgent and wishes to consume the created world, but on the other hand, he is angered by uncontrolled expressions of indulgence. This suggests something interesting about Ardra Nakshatra. There's an extreme fascination for the external world that is so intense that it can be self-destructive. So much so that it even frightens the Ardra natives themselves, and it can make them want to run away from the overstimulating reality of the outside world, especially the modern world. Now to discuss to some length the symbolism of the teardrop. The name Rud means to shed tears or to cry, and this nakshatra strikes the nerves so sharply that it produces tears. Rahu nakshatras in general have very delicate senses and very delicate nervous systems. It is as if whatever colors the average person sees, the Rahu nakshatra native sees these colors more vibrantly, more intensely. It is as if whatever sound the average person hears, the Rahu nakshatra native hears more strikingly, more sharply. This is what allows Rahu natives to hear the subtlest nuances in music and appreciate the most complex flavors in food. One can then understand the various meanings of the tears of Ardra. Ardra, of course, is the one who makes you cry, and often these tears are contextualized as negative, but really these tears are both negative and positive because when your emotions are so very sensitive, when your senses are so very delicate, and when your mind is so very fragile, when you experience a wonderful morsel of food, the explosion of taste can be so overwhelmingly exquisite that it can bring you to states of ecstasy easily. You experience joy so much more intensely that it literally brings you to tears. But negative experiences also attack your nervous system more acutely than they do the average person, which also brings you to tears. This is another reason why some Ardra natives may actually take the attitude of rejecting the material world and rejecting relationships and even rejecting life, because the pains of life strike their nervous system too acutely for them to handle, that sometimes they wish to just run away from experience altogether, or sometimes even end their own lives because they cannot handle the extremities of living. They can choose to not use social media, give up on romantic relationships, and even fantasize about living out in the wild, removed from society, to protect their nervous system from the overstimulation of reality. Ardra Nakshatra is for this reason also related to manic depressives, individuals who reach the highest highs of joys, but also the lowest lows of misery. Another aspect of Rudra's story is being both male and female, but having to split himself. Naturally, to go in line with the rest of this interpretation, it can be said that its curiosity and its excitement to experience the material world is so intense that Ardra natives can often develop a curiosity for same-sex attraction and other activities that are socially forbidden for one's birth gender. So an Ardra man can develop curiosities about relationships with the same sex and can develop curiosities about living life as the opposite gender. And same goes for Ardra women, who may herself develop curiosities about sexual experiences with the same sex and also fantasize herself about becoming a man. Again, this is not necessarily a true homosexuality or a true transgenderism. Instead, it is extreme curiosity and fascination that knows no bounds. Now for the personality section. And before we continue, I kindly ask that you like and share this video, and please comment on the video to promote it. Also, I ask that you support my work on Patreon, where I have almost 200 articles exclusively on astrology and much astrological research as well. Ardra natives are often fascinated by different activities, and they have a fascination for what they don't know and cannot do. Because they wish to participate in new activities, they often come off as out of place whenever they act. Because in constantly attempting something new, in the beginning stages, one tends to come off as awkward, goofy, corny, lacking grace, stumbling, and even looking a little silly. People can often make fun of them for looking so out of place and looking cringeworthy, and sometimes can even beg them to stop attempting to sing or to dance or to do gymnastics or to play sports because they just come off as too weird and untalented. It is as if the activity is too opposite to their nature that it just looks bad to see them partaking of it. Naturally, the more confident Ardra native sticks to whatever activity they are fascinated by, because they understand that natural ability comes from performing an act again and again until it becomes natural. The less mature Ardra native can often become so paralyzed with embarrassment from other people making fun of them and become so traumatized that they never dare to try anything new ever again. They hold themselves back from experimentation and new discoveries for fear of being laughed at and ridiculed. And if the Ardra native is especially immature, they may in turn laugh and ridicule others whenever they look awkward and silly trying something new, as a way of stopping them from ever developing. This attitude is naturally born of a resentment that they have lost the courage and audacity to try new things themselves. So they may feel a sort of anger towards others that seem like they are allowed to do what they themselves have denied themselves of doing. Another behavioral trait relating to this is being overly sarcastic and not taking anything too seriously, but doing this as a self-defense mechanism. Let us say an Ardra native is trying something new, either out of their own volition or because they are being forced to. They may take on the attitude of not taking the activity very seriously and pretending to think that the activity is too lame, too uncool, too stupid, and proceed to make jokes about it, but only because they are afraid of failing. They may choose to take on this attitude so that in the possible events that they fail and make a fool of themselves, they can pretend like they never really gave the activity a sincere try anyways. And so it is fine if other people laugh at them because they don't care to do well anyways. We may see this cynical, sarcastic attitude of Ardra natives projected to multiple different scenarios. They may be fascinated by certain things, but pretend to themselves that they find those things lame as a means of controlling their own enthusiasm. In fact, this even brings us to some of their more pessimistic attitudes towards life as well. Ardra is the nakshatra of the bright-eyed child, whose fascination for the world is so acute that it literally produces tears of joy. But again, this also means that they experience pain even more acutely than the average person. And so, as another means of protecting their very delicate, very fragile nervous systems, they may take on the attitude of pessimism, so that the lows of life and the pains of life do not strike them so sharply. An Ardra native may be subconsciously very excited about a new undertaking, like becoming an amateur musician, learning how to make beats on their computer, learning how to sing, but may pretend to themselves and pretend to other people that they are only doing it as a joke, and may come up with some excuse to make it seem like it's not that serious. They may even make some songs bad and mediocre on purpose as a way of signaling to themselves and to others how much they don't take that activity seriously. But really, they may be concealing how much they truly love music and how much they daydream about becoming a famous musician. But their fear of the pains of life, specifically the pains of failure, keep them from being honest to themselves about that. It is as if they literally feel embarrassed by their own enthusiasm because they believe it betrays a sort of naiveness, a goofiness, a foolishness that they are very self-conscious about because they never want to be seen as foolish. They never want to be seen as naive. And this is also one of the reasons why Ardra natives can secretly hate to observe enthusiasm and joy and happiness in other people, because they deny themselves these sentiments and so develop a negative relationship with seeing other people express these same rejected sentiments. They may even go out of their way to ruin other people's happy moments for this reason. Ardra natives can often suffer at school and in other academic contexts because they are so easily seduced by stimuli that they can distract themselves very easily. They may often focus on 100 things at the same time while in class, following with the lesson, but also listening to other people's gossip, doing their tests, but also coming up with jokes to share with their friends in a moment when it's not opportune. They can often really struggle in the digital age because this nakshatra can easily allow their minds to be so dragged into the bottomless ocean of virtual stimulation that they lose control of their minds. Sometimes it is as if they are trapped in the loop of endless scrolling on social media, and this is why many of them can actually take the opposite attitude of completely deleting all social media, not use Twitter, not use Facebook, not use Instagram as a means of rescuing their minds, because it can get to the point where they may feel like they have no control over their own minds. It is as if to overcompensate for how easily their minds can lose control of itself, they must now exercise extreme control over their minds by blocking out all stimulation. This is the reason why we actually find that there are Ardra natives that can be against technology and against the technological evolution. They may even be the sort of parents to deny their children smartphones and computers until they reach an age that they can manage these overstimulating addictive devices. But on the other hand, because Ardra still maintains a deep fascination for all things stimulating, they are also one of the main people pushing for ever more advanced, ever more addicting technological innovations. This actually calls to mind the alleged hypocrisy of many of the world's tech billionaires. These same tech billionaires that create social media and create artificial intelligence and contribute to a world of paralyzing overstimulation to give to the masses actually practice something completely different within their own families. In their own families, they deny their children the use of virtual devices, believing that, especially at a formative age, such innovations can cause them great harm. So they push overstimulation to the masses, but protect the nervous system of their own children. They participate in the corrupting of the external world, but they protect their own internal world. This sort of behavior is very reminiscent of drug traffickers, for example, who often push the use of drugs to lower class communities, but protect their own children from these substances. And naturally, Ardra Nakshatra and Rahu relate to technology, drug use, and social hypocrisy. Ardra natives can often be some of the most repressed individuals because they deny themselves the things that they truly want quite regularly, even subconsciously. They can become the sort of person that outwardly expresses hatred and contempt for a particular activity, but secretly wishes that they had the audacity and the bravery to partake of that activity themselves. There are various examples of this. It could be an Ardra native that is a religious woman who chastises other women for dressing scandalously when deep down she overfocuses on those women out of a jealousy, resenting the fact that she does not give herself the freedom or does not have the freedom to dress that way herself. It could be an Ardra native that calls himself a communist and overly criticizes billionaires for not sharing their wealth, but in reality, he resents rich people for having more than him. It could be someone who feels insecure about their own appearance, but instead of addressing these insecurities directly, they externalize and project these feelings onto the wider society, campaigning for a change in beauty standards when in reality, their underlying motivations are to either dismantle the beauty standards so the Ardra native can feel included. And it could also take the form of an Ardra conservative man who swears he hates promiscuous women and women who wear makeup. A man who swears that he is only interested in women who are modest and pious, but he secretly desires to be with a more ravenous, liberal woman. Ardra Nakshatra can oftentimes overfocus on subjects that it claims to hate, but obviously through this obsession over that which it claims to hate, it betrays a secret fascination for that particular subject. What is really the reason you're constantly on social media criticizing this group of people or that group of people? Because if you claim to not like such matters, why not simply avoid and ignore them? Ardra Nakshatra also tends to have a strictly defined moral code or moral philosophy that they develop from a young age. A moral philosophy that is developed through watching other people live life and studying the mistakes that other people make. They are very afraid of committing sins and making mistakes, as they tend to struggle with a lot of guilt. They often pride themselves on their moral superiority, believing themselves capable of behaving more righteously if they were placed in the same situation as someone else who commits sins and other moral infringements. At their worst, they can judge and condemn others without properly understanding their situation. And it is this moral code that serves as yet another reason many Ardra natives feel very fearful of actually living life and trying new things, because it is as if they are afraid of exposing to themselves their own hypocrisy and immaturity. Hypocrisy in the sense of claiming they are morally superior, but then realizing they would commit the same mistakes as others. Immaturity in the sense of defining themselves as morally superior without first testing themselves in real-life situations to understand themselves tangibly. Ardra natives can have a tendency of externalizing their own problems and, in a way, blame them on society or the outside world. They can feel so incapable of controlling their own impulses and their desires that to them it only makes sense to blame the external world for being so seductive as to compel them to committing sin. Rahu is again the planet of addiction. An example of this could be someone who is addicted to gambling and cannot control themselves personally, and so decides to blame social media companies for allowing the promotion of gambling sites. And so they decide to campaign for social media companies to ban these sites instead of really trying themselves to control themselves.
Well, why is the whole staff here?
Because we've never seen you apologize for anything, ever.
Okay, fine. Anna, I am very sorry for firing you, okay? It was uncool and possibly illegal, but it's true. I was threatened to have another female doctor working here. The only reason that I am the way that I am is that I was raised in a system created by men that has pitted women against each other. So it's not my fault that I was threatened by Anna. It's the fault of the patriarchy and men like you, and you, and you, and especially you.
I'm a feminist too. And I think we should hire a third female doctor.
No. Are you out of your mind? No.
Okay, I didn't understand any of this. I'm going to go back to work.
Sexuality for Ardra natives can be especially interesting, as once again we are witnessing extremes. On the one hand, Ardra natives can be some of the most experimental, enjoying sexual acts others would call obscene, strange, odd, fascinated by sexual experiences with different types of people, either same-sex or someone who is transgender, people of foreign cultures, etc. But on the other hand, they can experience so much shame and so much guilt regarding these strange desires that they chastise themselves. And as always, they also overfocus on those who engage in the behavior they themselves wish to indulge in and express hate and criticism towards them as these people are embodying acts they consider totally shameful and yet are fascinated by. An example of this, again, could be a conservative Ardra Nakshatra man that is always criticizing members of the LGBT community, constantly calling for the banning of gay marriage, constantly on social media shaming homosexual and transgender individuals, but who secretly harbors same-sex attraction. This conservative Ardra man feels great shame and great guilt regarding his sexuality and denies himself every opportunity to experience and experiment with his sexuality, and for this reason overly focus on others, indulging in the very enjoyments he wishes he could allow himself. It is actually because Ardra natives are so aware of how easily they can lose control over themselves and their own minds that ironically they exercise a paralyzing level of self-control over themselves, literally freezing themselves from giving into their impulses, stopping themselves from indulging in the experiences that they secretly wish to indulge in. And this brings us back to yet another reason why Ardra Nakshatra often have this finger wagging and finger pointing attitude towards other people's behavior, towards specifically those who are indulging in the very enjoyments they themselves deny themselves. It is as if when they are criticizing other people for smoking or drinking or being promiscuous, they are really formulating arguments to further convince themselves why it is that they should not be engaging in that sort of behavior. But on the positive side, Rahu Nakshatras are the most equipped in protecting themselves from being destroyed by the stimulation of the external world. And these Nakshatras are also related to extreme spiritual development because they teach themselves early on to withdraw their energy from the seductions of the external. Whereas the average person may destroy themselves in the technological age, Ardra Nakshatra develops the ability to carefully and intelligently interact with the outside world for pleasure and then close the doors on the outside world to not be destroyed by it. Rahu Nakshatras are actually the ones we should all be learning from to understand how to exist within the digital age, to benefit from it, to grow from it without succumbing to its negative sides. Ardra understands how to balance being both indulgent and self-controlled.